Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Hunter-Reid, Commissioner of Higher Education here in the state of Louisiana with the Higher Education Climate Action Task Force. We have been working to develop an action plan to support the higher education sector in moving climate action forward, and we're delighted to have you with us.
And I'm Walter Kimbrough, past president of Dillard University and Philander Smith College and a task force member. We have a fantastic panel to help us examine the unique contributions that HBCUs, TCUs, HSIs, MSIs, and community partnerships have made in advancing equitable climate action and in the transition to a clean economy and sustainable society. We have heard about the great work being done at minority-serving institutions throughout our panel series, from workforce development to curriculum. And today, we have the opportunity to look deeper into how the institutions themselves and the communities they serve have generated those bright spots and models for climate action.
Thank you so much, Walter. As Walter mentioned, or Dr. Kimbrough mentioned, we have a great panel. So I'd like to introduce those individuals before we get started. We're fortunate to have today Dr. Robert Bullard, who is the founding director of the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice at Texas Southern University. He's also a co-founder of the HBCU Climate Change Consortium and the National Black Environmental Justice Network. So we welcome him. We also have with us Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass Shekils, who serves as the Food Sovereignty Director at Nuweta Hidatsu Saunish College at TCU, and she is senior researcher at the University of Montana. Delighted to have you with us. In addition, we will hear from Dr. Joshua Veers, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor for Interdisciplinary Research and Strategic Initiatives at UC Merced. And then finally, we'll hear from Anastasia Rodriguez, who is Vice President for Administration and Finance at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Welcome to each and every one of you. Now, our process, we'll hear from the panelists, then task force members will ask questions. And I know this is going to be a rich and engaging conversation. So thank you to the task force members and certainly to the audience watching online with us here today. So we will begin by hearing from Dr. Robert Bullard, who is frequently called the father of environmental justice. He will discuss how the HBCU Climate Change Consortium creates partnerships with frontline communities on climate issues, plus how communities and communiversities, if you will, are collaborating to shape opportunities for the people who are most affected by climate change to make sure they have say in how we are responding. So Dr. Bullard, thank you so much. I've read some of your work and just honored to have you with us.
Well, thank you very much. And good morning and afternoon for those on the East Coast. I think it's important to understand the historical context of how important HBCUs have been in the foundational work of environmental and climate justice. Beginning in the early 90s, it's no accident that the first environmental justice centers at universities in the United States were, all five of them were at HBCUs. The Deep South Center that was at Xavier University, the Environmental Justice Resource Center that was at Clark Atlanta University, the Environmental Health Institute, Justice and Health Institute at Florida A&M University, the Environmental Justice Center at Hampton University, and the Environmental Justice Legal Clinic at Thurgood Marshall, and from the at Texas Southern University. And the building out of those centers and forming the collaboration, beginning with those five universities and expanding it out to include not just dealing with environmental justice and pollution, but also expanding to incorporate the issues of climate resilience, disaster response, and energy justice issues. And beginning in 2013, our 5 base university centers expanded to include the consortium, HBCU, community-based organization, CBO, Gulf Coast Equity Consortium. And it had the whole mission of partnering our HBCUs with the frontline community-based organizations, developing curricula, developing mentoring, developing the kinds of research to action activities. And since 2016, we've had an HBCU climate change conference, and we had our 9th annual HBCU climate change conference in New Orleans this past month. One of the largest. After COVID, we were not up and running in person. The 2 years that COVID was hit the hardest, but we came back stronger. There were 450 students, faculty, and participants presenting papers and poster sessions, not just HBCU students, but students who are dealing with environmental, climate justice, energy justice issues. And we've been able to build out grant making and supporting research, scholarships. And just this past year, we received several $1 million in grants to start the Environmental Justice Climate Corps, which will be student internships, paid internships for our students to work on these major issues. I just wanted to give you that little history and walking from a very small footprint to a very large footprint when it comes to these issues. And the last point I'd like to make is that several HBCU representatives from our consortia serve on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. This is a 25-member advisory council that advises the Council on Environmental Quality on issues related to climate and energy and Justice 40, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So we have a very important role to play, and we're trying to step up, step out, and do what we can to influence policy as well as scholarships and work on the ground with those communities that need resources and are suffering the impacts of climate change first, worst, and longest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not know about the conference in New Orleans, or I would have been there, but perhaps Dr. Kimbrough had a chance to stop in, but that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I know we'll have questions for you and other panel members. So task force members, as you jot down your notes, don't forget to put your questions in the chat. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass She-Kills, who will share models for incorporating tribal ecological knowledge into post-secondary institutions, including co-creating climate solutions and offering us examples of how TCUs uplift the experiences of Indigenous youth and students. The floor is yours.
Good morning. So our work at the tribal colleges is relatively new in comparison to some of our partner institutions like HBCUs. The Nueces Herada Sanesh College is just turning 50 years old, and one of the things that's really important at tribal colleges is all of our missions are directly to support the preservation and perpetuation of our languages and cultures. And so within all of our coursework, that means that there has to be the Hiradza language, the Mandan language, and the Rikra language, and that's specific to my tribal college. And that's similar across all of the TCUs in the United States as well as in Canada. And one of the things that's really I've enjoyed about doing research and working at tribal colleges is we are so integrated into the community. Our research is directly the needs of our community, and we're able to also include our community members in the research that we do. And so they're helping us to identify what are the specific needs that we need to be talking about. And we're able to have both the research as well as developing our degree programs to prepare our students to work in these specific fields. We are a smaller institution, and so are able to also collaborate with our public schools and bring in students as well as go into the schools. So having the opportunity then to include both that multi-generational, our elders, our young people. Our institution has an agriculture department. We also have a sustainability degree program. And so both of those are ways that we're working to respond to the issues we're seeing related to the global climate change issues. So being able to develop sustainable practices within our communities, as well as be responsive as far as our food development production. What are traditional crops, for example, that are drought resistant? So those are just some of the examples of things that we're doing at our institution, and some of the, even though we're small, and even though we don't have a lot of the same financial resources as some institutions and potential partners, we have other resources within our community that I think really give us a unique opportunity to make some big changes. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And we look forward also to hearing more about the multi-generational approach and the work that you're doing through the questions from the task force members. So thank you for sharing that about the tribal college work. Now we'll hear from Dr. Joshua Veers, who will give an overview of the University of Colorado Merced's innovation approach to supporting economic development in the Valley, the San Joaquin Valley, while advancing research on campus, and how the student population served has helped shape the university's climate mission. So we always like to hear about how the student voice and student action is shaping the work. So Dr. Veers, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Dr. Reed. And most of you will probably recognize that the San Joaquin Valley is in California, though during our summer we prefer to be in Colorado. I think being at a higher altitude would be a little cooler for us. We're located in the heart of the San Joaquin Valley, which you may know is where half of the nation's fruits, nuts, and vegetables are produced. And so today I'm just going to briefly talk about our institution. You may not be aware of what we're up to lately, and then give you a sense of some of the directions we're going with respect to climate and addressing the climate crisis. So as was mentioned, I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Interdisciplinary Research and Strategic Initiatives. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the strategic initiatives toward the end, but I also serve as a professor in environmental engineering, and my research is at the intersection of climate, food production, water security, and land management. So happy to add what I can to today. Chancellor Juan Sanchez Munoz sends his regrets. As you may know, he serves as the vice chair for the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, or AASCU. He would normally be speaking to you all and probably be wearing a bow tie. So I'm going to do my best to fill in for him today. So the University of California, Merced is the 10th and newest campus of the University of California system. It's just under 20 years old. We opened our doors in 2005, and in a short period of time, we've grown very rapidly. We're almost to 10,000 students at this point. And there's some very unique things about our geography that I'll share with you, but I think it's important to point out that we purposefully placed this campus in the heart of the San Joaquin Valley, in part because it was the largest underserved part of our state. And so that paradox of, despite being the nation's fruit basket, it was also one of the most impoverished and certainly one of the most underserved. So less than 1 out of 5 of our residents has a bachelor's degree. Unfortunately, the dirtiest air in America is in the San Joaquin Valley, and asthma in children are twice the national average. Unfortunately, our employment rates are often twice the national average as well, and a number of other ills. that have challenged this region for nearly a century. So putting the University of California in this place intentionally was an experiment in higher education. Could we make a difference in a place that desperately needed it? And I would say in 20 years' time, I think we've begun to do that. One example of that is we're now drawing about 40% of all of our students from the San Joaquin Valley. So as a research-forward university, this is the first time that many of these students have been able to access engaged research as part of their education portfolio. Uniquely to our campus, 99% of our undergraduate students actually come from California. Whereas our sister institutions at UC Berkeley, UC LA, San Diego, et cetera, often draw out-of-state or international students. In fact, we're serving a populace that's unique to California and the San Joaquin Valley. And that means several things, one of which is first-generation college goers. So 2 out of 3 of our students, over 50% are Pell eligible, which means that they're coming in with significant financial challenges. We're considered an HSI, more than 50% of our student body is Hispanic, but 88% of our students self-identify as one or more underserved groups. So it's incredibly diverse. 1 out of 10 of our students are undocumented, and that presents some significant challenges for us to be able to serve their educational needs as we go forward. So despite some of the challenges that we have in the region, but with the promise of a student body that is the face of California, we've been able to do a number of remarkable things. Whether you believe the U.S. News and World Report or not, I think it's remarkable that in less than 20 years, we've been able to jump into the top ranks of nationwide rankings. So 60th overall and 28th among public universities and top 10 within California, which means that some of our other UC campuses are neck and neck with us. Most importantly for us, we were ranked number 4 for social mobility. And those are things that we take very seriously and try to support our students with. That goes hand in hand with the research mission of our university. And so we were the fastest ever to reach the Carnegie R2 designation. As you may have noticed, the R1 tier is going to change a little bit in the years to come. I suspect we'll reach those ranks and certainly doing that. But more telling of the work that we're trying to do is that with a faculty of about 300, 37 of our faculty have achieved the NSF Career Award stage. So that's over 10%, and that in and of itself is fairly remarkable. In terms of our identity, you heard a little bit about our diverse student body, but the other part of our identity is the commitment to sustainability and addressing the climate crisis. We're the first campus in the U.S. to achieve climate neutrality, and part of that is being a new campus. So all of our buildings are new, which helps. So we just finished the largest public-private partnership in higher education. That was a $1.3 billion project where we built 13 buildings in 3 years. Every one of them was LEED Platinum certified. So we're being able to achieve triple bottom line in terms of our energy usage, water usage, et cetera. To talk a little bit more about some of our initiatives and something that I'm working on specifically at the intersection of economic development and climate is developing an innovation center for research and entrepreneurship in agri-food technology. And that was recently supported by the Economic Development Administration, the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. We were fortunate to receive over $65 million to advance not just the research and development aspect of developing a climate resilient food system, but more importantly, to work with our local community colleges to address the future of work in agriculture, and in particular to develop what we call a tech force. And central to that is what we call inclusive innovation. And this is putting our students back into the communities to learn what their needs are and to co-develop the technological solutions that are going to lift people out of poverty, but also out of dirty, dangerous jobs for low pay. So as we think about a future of a climate-stressed region producing the nation's foods, we want to be able to do that that's both sustainable from an agroecological purpose, but also engaging the very population that draws their work and their income from producing our nation's food. This has been a challenge in part because many of these students have seen higher education as a pathway out of the agricultural sector. And what we're suggesting, in fact, is that their future could be in agriculture, but new and innovative ways. This is around artificial intelligence. This is around robotics. in a whole new wave of how we produce food in a digital age. I just want to bring forward a concept that a colleague of mine, Kim Nicholas, in her book called Under the Sky We Make, is that oftentimes we're in denial, especially around climate. And as we move to acceptance, it can result in feelings of doom. And certainly I've felt that myself as we think about a future that's much hotter and perhaps less secure. This can result in one of two things, either paralysis or purpose. And I would like to think that higher education is the bastion then for purpose and providing our students with opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't have. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well said. Yes, we're focused on that purpose indeed. And thank you so much. I again have a million questions, so look forward to digging into that, Dr. Veers. Thank you so much. So we have one more panelist to hear from, but reminding you to add your questions to the chat so that we can get to our questions fairly quickly after we hear from Anastasia Rodriguez from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. She's going to describe for us how they have developed climate and sustainability partnerships in their community, and again, agribusiness in the region. So welcome to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to represent Dr. Heidi Anderson, who is unable to be with us this afternoon on this wonderful esteemed panel. The University of Maryland Eastern Shore is Maryland's 1890 land grant institution, and we feel very strongly about our identity as an 1890 land grant institution. Being an HBCU with historic underfunding, we have had to use ingenuity and entrepreneurial mindset to solve the problems of an aged infrastructure and deferred maintenance. Unfortunately, unlike UC Merced, we've been in existence since the late 1800s, and I actually have 5 buildings on the National Historic Registry. So we have buildings that are very, very old to buildings that are very, very new, with our School of Health Related Professions and pharmacy building being added to our campus in the last year. With that, we have to constantly think about how to not only add new buildings to our campus, but to maintain the buildings that we have. And thinking about how to do that in a sustainable and using, environmentally friendly techniques, but also using a sustainable mindset to allow us to make these improvements and maintain our campus in a way that is also serves environmental justice for our students and maintains affordability of the education that we give here at UMES. So on our campus, we have actually pushed very hard to make sure that all of our new buildings meet at least LEED Gold. And we've been successful at that in our last couple of projects. We're about to break ground on a new agricultural research building that will be our campus's first, as planned, new net zero building. So that's a big thing for us. We're also, one of our projects that we're working on right now is we're working with the Maryland Department of Energy and a Maryland company called Optimize Renewables to work on building a microgrid for the campus. And that's really important to us because, one, we have an aged electrical infrastructure because of the age and lifetime of our campus. And so that project will actually allow us to work on renewing and gaining sustainability, but also just upgrading our electrical infrastructure, while at the same time reducing the campus's overall carbon footprint and allow us to ensure that we can maintain power in critical buildings to serve our students, as well as protect our research in the event of a prolonged loss of power from the grid. So as you can see through those projects, we see sustainability as vital to the overall health of the institution, but also because it gives us a financial advantage over time to be able to maintain an affordable education for our underserved students. So the action items that somebody mentioned to talk about action items. One of the things that I think about from an action items perspective, as a person who is responsible for our facilities, responsible for the things that we're putting on our campus, is that when you're thinking about sustainability projects and ways to fund them, look at that also in your mindset of deferred maintenance. All of our campuses have significant amounts of deferred maintenance. And what we can do is think about how can we use sustainable measures to rehabilitate that which already exists. That way we're not tearing things down and just replacing it for the sake of replacement, that we're thinking about how can we maintain the things that we already have and stretch our dollars further by using sustainable measures. Also, the things that we put in our buildings that are more sustainable, such as geothermal, those things actually make our buildings last longer. And those systems are much easier to maintain over time, especially with changes in the EPA. So sometimes you have to spend a little bit more money on the front end to be able to actually save money on the long term and be more sustainable over time. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is in new construction, one of the things I've noticed as we've been preparing for our projects on campus is that a lot of the time when you have cost overruns or you have concerns, especially in the inflationary environment that we've been in since COVID, is that the first thing that people try to value engineer out is the sustainability measures. And those are the things that actually over the lifetime, they're a short-term cost saving measure, but over the lifetime of the actual facility are something that will save money and actually be better for everyone over time. And so those are the two things that I would actually encourage as we have further discussion today to think about, is not thinking about the funding and the financial ramifications on the short term, but thinking about that over the long term and what do our students deserve on our campuses. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vice President Rodriguez, who I did meet this summer. She's a participant in the AASCU MLI program. So when I saw your name, I was like, oh, I know her. So thank you for that. And so we're going to go through questions, and I'll actually come back to you, and it'll be a two-part question. The first part for you, and then the second part for Dr. Bullard. You talked about the need for the investment in your infrastructure. And so just to be clear, are you getting that initial investment, the resources, are they coming from the state? Is the state being supportive for you? Because, you know, most HBCUs, one of the challenges is people don't have the resources to make those kind of investments, which over the long term will do some of the things that you talk about in terms of sustainability. So that's the first part. Then on the back end of that, for Dr. Bullard, if he has any recommendations for HBCUs that are in states like Louisiana, where the incoming governor has said over and over again that climate change is a hoax, how will they be able to go about getting resources to do some of the things that Maryland Eastern Shore is going to be able to do?
So to answer your question, we're working with the Maryland Department of Energy. And so we have actually been granted a planning grant right now to plan our microgrid for our campus. So we got through step one, which is receiving the funding from the state to assist us in planning our microgrid. But we do have to still look for entrepreneurial opportunities to work with organizations, preferably ones that have a little bit more experience in this space. And then we're working with them to go out and look for grant funding from the state of Maryland, federally, wherever we can find it, to help support us. So no, we do still suffer from the same problems as most HBCUs, that we don't have, our operating budget is not going to support these types of things. So we're having to be a lot more entrepreneurial and just thinking about how can we marry the two things that we need, which is maintaining our facilities and thinking about the future and the environment, and how can we put those together in a way that makes someone at our state Department of Energy or federally want to invest in us.
Let me just say, first of all, the state of Texas or the state of Louisiana will never give our state institutions or any of our HBCUs sufficient funds to do what needs to be done. Let me just take the opportunity to say that the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice, which is housed at Texas Southern University, and the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice in New Orleans, we have partnered to work on the Justice 40 initiative that the White House has put in place, because we serve on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And we have assisted in getting $60 billion for environmental justice in the Inflation Reduction Act. Another $60 billion would it be to deal with clean energy transition. And so the idea of how do we position our consortia, in other words, the HBCU Climate Change Consortium, which is housed at TSU as the lead HBCU, but we have 35 HBCUs in our consortium. And we've, between our two centers, the Deep South Center and the Bullard Center, we've received $8 million from the Bezos Earth Fund to deal with Justice 40. Justice 40 is an initiative by the White House to transition, to position 40% of the benefits that would accrue from transition to a clean energy economy to what they're calling disadvantaged communities. These are environmental justice communities, and many of our HBCUs are located in those communities. The community university partnership that we developed with our Justice 40 using private foundation monies, the $8 million has been used to position our schools and the partnerships that we have with the community-based organizations that we have right now over 100 organizations partnered with our HBCUs in 12 states. The other initiatives that we have used is funding from the Waverly Street Foundation, which gave us $5 million that would be used to develop expanding our partnerships on projects with our individual institutions and our community-based organizations. And again, that works with the energy transition, workforce development, solarizing our campuses. Just a couple of weeks ago, we submitted a $250 million Solar for All grant to the EPA. Our consortium also has been able to have a cooperative agreement, TSU's leading it with DOE, Department of Energy, which would be the cooperative agreement is the vehicle by which federal funds and private foundation funds can go into the $1.5 million that we received from DOE and the $500,000 that we received from the JPB Foundation as the seed for developing the microgrids and the clean energy hubs within our own network and consortium. As a matter of fact, TSU, which has a MOU with Brookhaven Lab, which is part of the DOE, and we're working with the National Argonne Lab to develop a microgrid with Texas Southern University and CUNY Homes, which is a public housing development in 3rd Ward, as well as the 3rd Ward Community Center, as well as the schools in 3rd Ward, as well as some of the homes that are in and around the campus. We're using the model that's been used in Chicago, Bronzeville, that the National Argonne Lab set up, but we're basing our model in terms of developing we have the money for the plan, we have the monies for part of the build out, and now we're getting the expertise from our HBCU technical support teams to really put this in action. We will be able to export the model that we have to other campuses that we have been having at least a half dozen meetings with our consortium members to see where they are and what are their priorities, and working with the university presidents to show what this will do for reducing the cost of energy and making the campuses more sustainable, and reducing and having our students and faculty involved in the research, in the policy, and working together. The last thing I want to say is that we are using public-private partnership monies. We're applying for federal grants. We've been able to secure grants for developing assisting and supporting grant writers who can help the schools who may not have the capacity to develop the grants. We've been able to work with foundations to get them to assist and support and provide resources to our consortium members that can also provide technical support to our community-based organizations so that they can apply for the grants directly. And part of the Inflation Reduction Act, monies can go directly to the community-based organizations and nonprofit, because we know if the federal funds on the Inflation Reduction Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or Justice 40 go to Austin, we have to fight like hell to get the money to our blue cities. The same thing is true in other red states with blue cities, and so we have to make sure that we make opportunities for resources to flow to us directly, as opposed to counting on that money to come from the state. Thank you.
Got it. Thanks. So next we'll hear from Joni, if you'll ask your first question, and then Lande, if you'll ask your first, and then Jada. We'll go in that order. And if I have time to circle back, or there's some other people, we'll add them in too. But we'll go in that order: Joni, Lande, and Jada.
Okay, thank you. Again, Dr. Bullard, I was hoping to hear just a little bit more about the Environmental Justice Climate Corps, who's participating, how the projects are decided. Are people working as a team, or are they spread out in different projects, and where that funding is coming from?
Okay, yeah, we received $2 million from the McCrory Foundation. We didn't even apply. They just called and said they want to give us a grant. We had a Zoom call. More of that's happening today. We got the call from Waverly Street, from Bloomberg, from Bezos. And the way that we're designing our Environmental Justice Corps is based on our community university partnerships and our mentoring, our faculty mentors, and the longevity of those schools that have been participating in our HBCU Climate Change Consortium and the Climate Change Conference. So it's almost based on which schools have been active, which schools have the faculty mentor in place, so that we can have good participation. This past summer, we were able to fund 25 Environmental Justice Climate Corps members, and it was a 6-week program, and we gave the students $5,000. And the idea is that they were to develop projects with communities, with the faculty mentors, and present their papers or their poster sessions at the Climate Change Conference in New Orleans. We also have the students who would like to present their research at national conferences, and we have resources for that. And last year we took students to the COP27 climate conference in Egypt, and this last COP meeting. And so some of our students, we didn't have an internship program then, but we have one now. But we found the money to take the students there with their faculty mentors, and so that they could see what's happening on the global scene. And last year at that COP, we had a climate justice pavilion on the government side. We raised $1.9 million, and we were able to have programs on the government side that we were able to bring some of our students, our faculty, and some of our partners from the Global South in terms of young people, and as well as some of the non-NGO community leaders from the Global South. So our goal is to expand we got 35 schools, is to expand the Climate Corps to all 104 HBCUs. And with the new White House Climate Corps, we plan on interfacing with that so that we can get the Climate Corps that the federal government is funding to interface with what we're doing, so that we have full coverage. And that's our goal, and we're going to be pushing hard to make sure that that happens.
What a wonderful opportunity for your students, for all the students. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I want to just start by thanking Dr. Bullard for his enormous leadership in this field for so many years, and just the history of the HBCUs and exhibiting that leadership for all of our colleges. So start with that gratitude. My question actually is directed to Ruth and Josh, and I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the policies and practices that you think need to be adopted by other colleges and universities that MSIs are already demonstrating. Because I think part of the question as we think about the challenges of climate change is really addressing issues at scale so that it is the results are both redounding to our individual institutions, but more broadly to our states, to our nation, and to the globe. So can you talk a little bit about the kinds of policies, practices, or academic programs that you think are worth people replicating and trying to scale across all of higher education?
Ruth, you want to start?
I'm going to let you start because, man, some of these scales are so different for me at a tribal college versus a university. And so our policies and our academic programs and the communities we serve are so much different. And then just thinking about some of the things, I know there's been a lot of focus on talking about grants and research and some of that other infrastructure. And it's just so different at a tribal college, our kind of infrastructure. And I guess I keep thinking too about our land base as a TCU versus other land grant institutions. So as Indigenous people, you know, this continent is our home, but yet we have these other institutions that are on our ancestral homelands. And so I have a lot of thoughts. So I'm going to defer to you, Josh, to go ahead and start.
Well, thank you. It's a profound series of questions, actually. I think it's something we all struggle with, regardless if we're 150 years plus down the track or only 15 years. How do continuous change management given a rapidly changing environment, both sociopolitically as well as environmentally. So those are profound challenges that we all face. A few things did come to mind that I'm happy to share with you. First and foremost, access becomes important. And at UC Merced, given that most of our region is underserved and undereducated, how do we improve access to education? I myself went to a community college. I benefited greatly from the trial and error that I experienced while trying to get on my own 2 feet and go forward. And so I'm a profound believer in integrating across the educational spectrum. And so we've put into place a number of programs where we do in-reach to our local middle schools. And in particular, we find in middle schools, girls principally drop out of STEM. Creating pathways for which they can remain engaged in STEM. And sometimes that means having, programs that are specific to their needs. But the way that we do that is near peer mentorship. So we put students, our undergraduate students, into those classrooms, and they provide a curriculum, as well as we use what are called VEX kits. These are like Lego, but they're small robots. And so they both build and program those bots to do innovative things around the curriculum. We upscale that to our local high schools, and there we have a curriculum around drones, and using drones to be able to map their local surroundings around the high school. And the vision there is really we're trying to partner unsuspecting groups. So you might have a robotics club and the FFA that normally might not work together, but here they do some common problem solving using some new technology and hopefully develop a passion for that. In the community college sector, we have MOUs and established partnerships with 8 different community colleges throughout our region, and trying to help not just with the curriculum development for transfer students, which are very important for us, but also creating pathways for a future tech/workforce that mirrors the needs of our particular region. For the transfer students, we're challenged at UC Merced in that if a student qualifies to transfer in the University of California, they get their pick. For the most part, they could choose Berkeley, UCLA, any number of the other campuses. So for us, there needs to be some value add. For many of our students, especially from the San Joaquin Valley, being close to family is really important. And that's not surprising given the diaspora, not just for, the Hispanic, Spanish-speaking residents of our valley, but we have a very large Hmong community. We have a very large Indian community as well. And so closer to the region seems to be a pathway for that. And so we try to develop skills that transfer into either entrepreneurship so that they stay in the Valley, or perhaps things that elevate that. Two quick things that I guess I'll point to in addition to that. Our service learning program runs across from first year through fifth year. All of our students, regardless of major, can participate in service learning, and that's well developed, and that is highly focused on community projects. And then lastly, we were able to change the course of the University of California. Last time that it changed around the Ag Experiment Station funding through USDA for our land-grant university, which is the UC, was 1959 when UC Riverside and UC Davis became campuses. We just recently able to receive that designation along with UC Santa Cruz. So as we develop that intentionally, we're working with the local Native community, particularly around doing, propagating and developing means by which Native plants, especially for basket weaving, are grown and propagated on our experiment station. And so the chancellor's designated about 40 acres as an experimental smart farm. But despite the smart and tech forward aspect of that, we're definitely getting back to our roots and planting some of these native plants, which can draw in our local community in ways that otherwise we wouldn't. Thank you.
Thanks. Jada, right before you go, Ruth, let me let you jump back in if you want to add anything else.
Yeah. So Josh, I just love the last part of what you said, because that's like super exciting to me because I love plants. But I guess some of the more clear thoughts that I have in regards to the question, I would love to see institutions, as far as policies and procedures, when possible, give back land to the Native communities that they reside on when possible, or imagine ways that you can, like Josh said, collaborate with those communities and provide access. Also, another thought is regarding one of the issues we're seeing now is the issue of traditional ecological knowledge there's a big push to integrating and using traditional ecological knowledge. And I think that we've seen that happen in a lot of ways, but more so now. And so I would say not necessarily a policy or procedure, but maybe just a best practice is to move forward very thoughtfully with the not having this continued extractive nature regarding Indigenous knowledges, and working directly either with those tribal communities or with Native faculty. And if you don't have Native or Indigenous faculty, really consider cluster hires. And so those are just some more clear thoughts versus my initial response. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead, Jada.
Something. Can I add something to this?
Oh.
I think it's important to understand that the different schools and that we have on the call have different histories and different, in some cases, worldviews that reflect their own experiences, and we should not look alike. And I think, and I'm speaking from the HBCU heritage point of view. I graduated from land-grant university, Alabama A&M University. I graduated from my master's from Atlanta University, an HBCU that was created by the Freedmen's Bureau to educate former slaves. And my sociology department, where I received my master's, was founded by W.E.B. Du Bois. So our HBCUs, which in many cases are public and private, but they have the distinction of having a history of Sankofa, which is African proverb, the bird looking back to look forward. Our institutions has always been the tip of the spear for education for liberation and education for seeding movements, whether it's the anti-slavery, civil rights, peace and justice, environmental justice, climate justice is no different. So our history of coming together as a collective, that's in our DNA. And we should not look like the University of California, Berkeley, or University of Michigan, because we have a different mission. And so our consortium brings all that together. As an individual institution, we can do a lot, but as a consortium coming together, we can be as competitive as any other institutions coming together when we use our strengths. I want to make that plain and clear, that we are the differentness of our different institutions, whether we talk about HSI or tribal serving, that uniqueness needs to come out, and the mission and the goals of getting and advancing the justice part across the board, not just climate, but economic justice, racial justice, gender justice, land rights, sovereignty, all of that needs to flow through and get emphasized and not get blended as if we are going to be just the R1 lookalike. No, that's not what we are or who we are.
Got it. Thanks. Go ahead, Jada.
Hello. For Dr. Bullard, my question was, what steps do you take with your different partnerships with different HBCUs? What steps do you take to build those collaborations in the community? And basically, how do you sustain those collaborations? How do you keep the communities engaged? So, and I assume that is by like having goals on both ends for the community, for the university. So I'm kind of wondering, what are those goals as well?
Well, let me just say that we have a long history of developing those community university partnerships, and it's the best thing. The way it works is you have a memorandum of understanding so that the university knows what it's supposed to deliver and the community knows what it's supposed to deliver. And you develop partnerships by building trust and honesty and real partners, not just junior partners or silent partners, not just paper partners. And when it comes to sharing resources, grant writing, it's a partnership. I mean, if the university is going to apply for a grant and with the community organization, every step of the way it needs to be full transparency. We have developed partnerships where we've assisted groups get their 501c so that they can actually apply for grants themselves, and we assist and support. It's full transparency and trust, and in some cases we have partnerships that have lasted over 3 decades and outlived grants. It's not about the money, it's about building relationships that can sustain whether or not the money is there. The fact that there's money rolling out of the federal government and rolling into communities with partnerships, there's all kinds of partnerships now springing up. People parachuting into communities talking about we want to find a low-income minority community and couldn't find a community with a Google map because they've never worked with communities. So that's not what we do. We do real, authentic partnerships based on the relationship that we have built and the trust that we have built, and they work. They work.
All right, thanks. Kim?
Sure, thank you so much. I appreciate all of the speakers. I'm curious about student engagement and student mindset. I know through these listening sessions, sometimes we've heard that students were a catalyst for these conversations and for action and initiatives. In other places, you had an engaged faculty member or maybe a campus leader or like a Walter Kimbrough or Dr. Bullard. So I'm curious about, where did the energy come from to lead the kinds of work that you're doing? And are the students sort of pushing the agenda, or are they collaborating with an already engaged campus community about sustainability and environmental justice? For whoever wants to start, maybe Joshua?
Yeah, no, thank you. And again, a very excellent question. As a continuing professor that's in the classroom, I have to say that we're still suffering from the pandemic, and a student body that I think for a few years to come, at least, will have some challenges on campus. I've seen that, firsthand, and their willingness to engage. I think I certainly hope so. And there are really kind of two parts to that. One, the internal leadership in which we find our student body are driven by a number of different factors, as we know, and a rapidly changing planet, and finding their place on the planet, I think, is part of it. We were very fortunate to have several students with a vision around the program Next Tech for doing the middle school outreach, and I think it's just empowering them and providing access and connecting them to the right people so that they can, pursue their vision. Sometimes we enable that with small stipends and or full employment, and so I'm happy to say that my team in particular, we hire between 15 and 20 students every year to pursue the different programs, and so providing them with that paycheck, I think, goes a long way. On the flip of that, for incentivization, we have a number of different programs where they compete for fairly large dollars, in my opinion, for different solutions, whether that's developing a mobile app with a social purpose, or perhaps developing a new solution for a community. For a lot of our students that are certainly have financial need, being able to remove a barrier to entry for them goes a long way, especially because many of them are working one or two different jobs in order to make ends meet.
Let me just jump in real quick. Anastasia, if you'll take a minute to answer the question, and then Ruth, you as well, just about a minute each. We're almost at time, so I want to give you two last words on this question.
So I would like to say, as far as UMES is concerned, Dr. Anderson, our university president, is very vocal about our sustainability measures and making sure that we're meeting and we're thinking about climate change and the effect of our footprint on our campus. We also have a sustainability committee that we're kind of re-energizing. And it's interesting, our students don't really necessarily say specifically that they want certain things, but they do expect them. So when we start talking about our new projects or our new buildings and things like that, they do have an expectation that we're doing those things, even though they are not necessarily vocal about it on the front end. But one of the other things that we're also doing with our partnerships with outside entities as we're bringing sustainable measures to campus is we're trying to create internships and workforce opportunities for those students to be involved in those projects to gain, knowledge and further their education, but also make them workforce ready in those fields when they graduate. And so we've been looking for partnerships to work with us that are going to also provide those experiential learning opportunities for our students. So we're trying to extend it in as many ways as possible.
And I guess I would say, from my experience at TCU's, one of the things that we embrace is encouraging our students to dream big and to come up with some of these wonderful ideas in regards to developing the research that they're going to be doing, which isn't always the experience that other Indigenous scholars have had at other institutions. Sometimes it's very directed. And just, I see Dr. Wildcat on the call, and as an example, if you don't know Paulette Blanchard, oh my gosh, you gotta check her out. So she was one of his students at a tribal college, and she was given the opportunity to dream big. And so she did. She created this huge proposal, and now she has the funding and is moving forward with the work on that proposal. So I guess that's just my thought in regards to the question of encouraging our students to dream big and to think big, and then providing them with the skills to make those things happen, whether that's those technical skills or the other skills related to being Indigenous scholars.
All right, thank you. We finished right up on time, and we've ended time for our Q&A. So I want to thank everyone for the questions and the answers. And Kim, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Walter. I appreciate it. And also want to say thank you to everyone for joining the 5th listening session of the Higher Education Climate Action Task Force. Certainly appreciated the discussion, the experts, and certainly the good questions from the task force. Our next and final listening session in this series will be on December 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be examining how public policy, financing, and organizing can scale climate impact. So we hope you'll register. We hope you'll join us. We hope you'll engage in the conversation. That concludes our session. Again, thanks so much for being with us.